Have you ever really stopped to think about the story of, well, you? I don't just mean your biography. I mean the incredible, mind-boggling journey of how you became the person you are right now, starting from just a single cell. Today, we're going to unpack that story.
So, let's just put it out there. How did you become you? What were the forces, the processes, the secret ingredients that shaped your body, your way of thinking, your personality? The answer to that huge question starts with a single, powerful idea: development.
So yeah, the whole thing kicks off with understanding what development even means, because it's so much more than just getting older or bigger. It's this incredible unfolding story that has a surprisingly predictable plot. Okay, so here's the official definition. Development is a pattern of changes that are progressive, orderly, and predictable. Think about that for a second. It's not random. There's a sequence to it. It kicks off at the moment of conception, and believe it or not, it continues for our entire lives, involving both incredible growth and eventually decline. Now, here's something people get mixed up all the time: the difference between growth and development. Growth, that's purely physical. It's getting taller, gaining weight, stuff you can literally measure with a ruler or a scale. But development, oh, that's the whole shebang. It includes that physical growth, sure, but it also covers all the complex, amazing changes in how we think, how we talk, and how we connect with other people. Growth is just one chapter in the much, much bigger story of development.
So, where does this story come from? Well, you can think of it as being written by two powerful authors working together: our genetic blueprint and the world we experience. Let's start with that blueprint.
Let's use an analogy here, because it's a really good one. Your genotype is the architect's blueprint for a building. It's the raw genetic code you inherit from your parents, the complete plan. But your phenotype, that's the finished building. It's how that blueprint actually gets built and expressed in the real world. It's all your observable traits, your eye color, your height, even parts of your personality. The blueprint provides the plan, but the environment, well, that determines what the final structure actually looks like.
Here's a really simple way to wrap your head around it. Your genes might set a potential range for, say, how tall you could be, but it's your environment, things like nutrition, healthcare, all that stuff, that decides where you actually land within that range. It's this constant, fascinating dance between nature and nurture.
And speaking of the environment, it's not just one single thing. It's actually way more complex. We all develop inside multiple layers of influence, kind of like a set of those Russian nesting dolls.
A psychologist named Yuri Bronfenbrenner came up with this amazing model to help us visualize it. At the very center of all those dolls, there's you. But you're surrounded by these nested systems, all these different layers of influence that directly and indirectly shape who you become. So let's start peeling back the layers.
The first doll, the smallest one right next to you, is the microsystem. This is your immediate world. It's all the direct, daily interactions you have with your family, your friends, your teachers, your neighborhood. This is where development gets up close and personal.
Okay, the next layer out is the mesosystem. Now this is really cool. It's not about the places or people themselves, but the connections between them. Like how well your parents and your teachers get along can have a huge impact on your experience at school. Then you have the exosystem, which is another step removed. These are things you're not even a part of, but they affect you anyway, like your parents' job. If they have a super stressful day at work, you can bet that is a ripple effect that reaches you at home.
And finally, we get to the biggest picture. The macrosystem is the broad culture you live in, all of its attitudes and ideologies. And cutting through all of these layers is the chronosystem. That's just a fancy word for the dimension of time. This covers everything from personal life events, like your parents getting divorced, to massive historical events that shape an entire generation.
Okay, that was the big, wide view. Now let's rewind the clock. Let's zoom all the way in and focus on the very, very beginning of the story: infancy. It is a period of absolutely mind-blowing change.
So what superpowers are we born with? And I'm serious. You might not think of newborns as powerful, but they are far from helpless. They come into this world preloaded with an incredible set of built-in abilities designed for one thing: survival.
Just check out some of these reflexes. The rooting reflex, that helps the baby find food automatically. The moro, or startle reflex, is basically their own tiny built-in alarm system. And that grasp reflex can be so strong that some newborns can actually support their own body weight with it. These are incredible survival tools that just fade away as their brain matures and they learn to take voluntary control.
Now, beyond these physical reflexes, infants are also making these giant cognitive leaps. And one of the biggest is developing what we call object permanence. You see, for a really young baby,
Out of sight is literally out of mind. If you hide a toy behind your back, as far as they're concerned, it has ceased to exist. But then, somewhere around 8 months old, they get this huge software update. They realize the world keeps existing even when they can't see it. This is a total game changer for how they understand reality.
And that brings us to the core emotional task of being a baby. The psychologist Erik Erikson put it perfectly. He said, "The first year of life is all about developing a fundamental sense of trust. When a baby's needs for food, warmth, and comfort are met consistently, they learn a profound lesson. The world is a safe and reliable place. And that becomes the bedrock for every single relationship they'll have in the future."
Okay, let's fast forward to the next chapter, childhood. This is where we see a much more complex sense of self start to emerge, and it's all driven by incredible advances in how we think and how we socialize.
The famous psychologist Jean Piaget gave us this really influential roadmap for how our thinking develops. And what's really cool is you can see this clear progression. We go from experiencing the world purely through our senses as babies to developing symbolic thought, using language and pretend play, and then finally to being able to think logically about the concrete world right in front of us.
So what does that shift in thinking actually look like in real life? Well, the classic clay experiment is a perfect example. Imagine you show a little kid 2 identical balls of clay. Then, right in front of them, you roll one ball into a long, thin snake. If you ask a younger kid which one has more clay, they'll almost always point to the snake because it looks bigger. But an older kid, one who can think logically, understands that if you can just roll it back into a ball, the amount has to be the same. Their thinking has become so much more flexible.
And as a child's thinking evolves, so does their idea of who they are. The journey of the self starts off very physical and concrete. A little kid will describe themselves by saying, "I have brown hair," or "I'm tall." But as they get older, their identity becomes way more psychological and social. They start defining themselves by internal things, like "I'm a good friend," or "I'm smart," and their friendships become super important.
We've journeyed through infancy and childhood, but here's the thing, the story is far from over. In fact, one of the most important ideas in modern psychology is that this whole process never really stops.
It's easy to think of development as something that just happens to kids, but the reality is it's a lifelong journey, full of both gains and losses. And maybe the most hopeful idea of all is that it's plastic. That means our brains, our skills, and our abilities can change and improve our entire lives. We are never a finished product. We are always in the process of becoming.
So let's just close with that thought. After seeing this incredible journey, from a genetic blueprint to our nested worlds, from our first reflexes to our current way of thinking, the real question is, what chapter of your own developmental story are you writing today?